The burning sky crackled with alien weaponry, casting a sickly green glow across the dying landscape of New Providence. Lieutenant Maya Chen's damaged fighter hung suspended in the upper atmosphere, its systems barely functional, offering her a panoramic view of humanity's worst nightmare unfolding below. The initial attack had come without warning. Massive Krex battleships, each one the size of a small city, emerged from quantum-fold space with surgical precision. Their weapon systems were unlike anything in human military archives. Energy cascades that liquefied infrastructure, molecular disruptors that turned living tissue into crystalline dust, targeting systems so advanced they could identify and eliminate specific genetic signatures. Maya's squadron had been obliterated within minutes. She'd watched her wingmates, people she'd trained with for years, shared meals and life stories with, vanish in brilliant explosions that lasted less than a heartbeat. Her own fighter had taken critical damage, its stealth systems barely keeping her hidden from the massive alien sensor arrays that swept the planet's atmosphere like predatory tendrils. Inside the cockpit, a wounded colonist named Gabriel Martinez lay strapped into the co-pilot seat. His left side was a mess of burns and plasma scoring, his breathing labored but controlled. Despite his injuries, his eyes remained sharp, scanning the tactical displays with the intensity that spoke of years of frontier survival. "They're not just destroying," Gabriel whispered, his voice a rasp of pain and calculation. "Look at the attack vectors, the energy dispersal patterns. This isn't random extinction." Maya knew he was right. The Krex weren't simply annihilating the human colony, they were conducting something more precise. Each blast, each molecular disruption seemed choreographed. Entire population centers were being systematically eliminated, but specific sectors remained untouched. Industrial complexes were targeted with surgical accuracy, while residential zones were reduced to molecular ash. Her neural interface, damaged but still partially functional, began pulling fragmented data from the remaining sensor networks. Quantum-encrypted burst transmissions flickered across her display, brief, encrypted messages from other surviving units. Most were distress signals, but a few contained tactical observations that confirmed Gabriel's suspicions. The colonists of New Providence weren't just victims. They were subjects of something far more complex than a standard military invasion. A proximity alarm chirped weakly. Maya's hands moved across the damaged control panel, bringing up a thermal overlay of the planetary surface. The Krex ground forces were advancing in geometric formations that defied traditional military doctrine. They weren't conquering territory, they were collecting something. Gabriel coughed, a wet sound that suggested internal bleeding. "My daughter," he muttered. "She works in xenorchaeology. Been studying some ruins we found in the outer rim. Said something about quantum resonance markers." Maya's training kicked in. She began cross-referencing the attack patterns with geological survey data from New Providence. The colony had been established on an apparently unremarkable planet. Mineral-rich, but nothing extraordinary. Yet the Krex were treating it like the most valuable real estate in the galaxy. The fighters' remaining power cells were dying. Soon, they'd be exposed, vulnerable to the massive sensor nets sweeping the atmosphere. Maya knew their survival depended on understanding the pattern, on finding the logic behind this seemingly random destruction. "Talk to me about those quantum resonance markers," Maya said, adjusting their camouflage protocols. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of someone who'd survived multiple frontier conflicts. Gabriel's eyes grew distant. Not markers, triggers, something buried deep in the planetary crust. "My team discovered anomalous energy signatures, quantum entanglement points that didn't match any known natural formation." The pieces were starting to form a terrifying picture. The Krex weren't just attacking New Providence. They were searching for something specific, something hidden beneath the planet's surface, and they were willing to systematically eliminate an entire human colony to find it. As another wave of alien battleships passed overhead, casting shadows that blotted out what remained of the planet's sky, Maya Chen realized they were caught in something far larger than a simple invasion. This was a surgical extraction mission, and humanity was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. And obstacles, Maya knew, could always be overcome. The underground tunnel network of New Providence's research complex was never meant to be a refugee route. Designed as a high-security research corridor connecting multiple xenological research stations, it now became the last refuge for humanity's most critical minds. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved with a predator's grace, her augmented tactical vest displaying a constantly shifting holographic map of their environment. Behind her, a group of 27 survivors, each selected not for their combat skills, but for their intellectual potential, picked their way through the cramped, emergency-lit passageways. Raj Mehta, the young tech specialist who had caught Elena's attention during the initial chaos, was carefully maintaining a jury-rigged sensor array. His fingers moved with a musician's precision, splicing quantum communication modules salvaged from destroyed research equipment. The device looked like a nightmare of exposed circuitry and mismatched components, but Elena knew better than to question his methodology. "The Kreks are hunting something specific," Raj muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "These sensor traces, they're not random interference. It's like they're running a massive quantum-level scan of the entire planetary substrate." Dr. Imani Okoro, a xenogeologist with decades of experience, interrupted. "Not just scanning. Mapping. There's a difference." Her dark eyes reflected the blue-green glow of Raj's improvised equipment. "Whatever they're looking for requires precision we can't even comprehend." The group moved past abandoned research stations, each one a snapshot of human curiosity frozen in time. Holographic displays flickered with half-completed research, specimen containers remained sealed, entire lifetimes of scientific pursuit interrupted by the sudden Kreks invasion. Elena's augmented reality display began picking up anomalous readings. The tunnel's geological composition was changing, subtly, almost imperceptibly. Mineral densities shifted, quantum resonance patterns emerged that didn't match any known planetary formation. "Stop," she commanded. The entire group froze. Raj's sensor array erupted in a cascade of quantum-encrypted data. His eyes widened. "This isn't natural. These readings, they're artificial. Someone, or something, engineered this entire geological structure." Dr. Okoro moved forward, running a specialized scanning device along the tunnel wall. "Not engineered. Constructed. There's a difference." Her voice carried the weight of scientific certainty. "These are deliberate quantum entanglement points, like a massive planetary-scale circuit board." The implications were staggering. Whatever the Kreks were searching for, it wasn't just buried on New Providence. It was fundamentally integrated into the planet's core structure. A distant explosion rocked the tunnel network. Dust cascaded from the ceiling, and for a moment, the group stood in perfect, terrified silence. Elena's tactical systems began correlating the tunnel's quantum signatures with the attack patterns they'd observed during the initial invasion. A horrifying pattern emerged. The Kreks weren't randomly destroying the colony. They were methodically eliminating anything that might interfere with their true objective. "We're not just running," Elena realized aloud. "We're being herded." Raj's sensor array suddenly spiked. A quantum encryption burst, human in origin, cut through the surrounding interference. It was a data package, heavily compressed and quantum-locked. With practiced efficiency, Elena interfaced her tactical systems. The message was from Maya Chen, the fighter pilot they'd presumed lost during the initial attack. The message was short, cryptic, but it changed everything. Quantum resonance markers, not a weapon, not a resource, something else entirely. Dr. Okoro's hand went to an old-fashioned locket around her neck. Inside, Elena knew, was a quantum data crystal, a storage medium so advanced it could preserve information across multiple dimensional states. "What aren't you telling us?" Elena asked. The xenogeologist's smile was equal parts terror and excitement. Let's just say humanity's history is far more complicated than the Kreks realize. Another explosion. Closer this time. The hunt was far from over, and humanity's most dangerous weapon had always been its capacity to turn the unexpected into an advantage. The underground bunker wasn't a military installation. It was a sanctuary of human innovation born from desperation. Marcus Donovan moved between jury-rigged computer stations like a conductor orchestrating a complex symphony of digital warfare. His hands never stopped moving, splicing quantum communication lines, redirecting power from emergency systems, creating something entirely new from the remnants of destroyed technology. 5 years in a maximum security corporate prison for cybercrime seemed like a trivial punishment now. Those years had been his training ground, where he'd learned to see networks not as static systems, but as living, breathing organisms waiting to be understood, manipulated, transformed. "We're not just hacking," Marcus muttered to his team. "We're creating a linguistic virus that speaks the Kreks' own technological language." Around him, a diverse group of specialists worked with a singular focus. Arya Kim, a former neural network architect, manipulated holographic data streams that looked like liquid light. Chen Wei, an expert in xenolinguistics, decoded fragments of Kreks communication protocols. Each team member was a specialist who had been marginalized, overlooked, or outright rejected by traditional systems. And now, they were humanity's last hope. The bunker hummed with repurposed quantum processors, salvaged communication arrays, and custom-built computational engines that pushed the boundaries of known technology. Every piece of equipment told a story of human improvisation. Circuit boards cannibalized from medical scanners, cooling systems cobbled together from industrial refrigeration units, power systems that drew energy from unconventional sources. "Initial breakthrough," Arya announced. Her voice was calm, but her eyes blazed with an almost predatory excitement. The Kreks communication network isn't just a transmission system. It's a living ecosystem of information. Marcus understood immediately. Most species would see a communication network as a tool. Humans saw it as a challenge to be understood, manipulated, transformed. Chen Wei projected a holographic representation of the Kreks communication protocols. It looked like a three-dimensional fractal, impossibly complex, with interconnections that seemed to shift and breathe. "Their language isn't just about transmission," he explained. "It's a form of distributed consciousness. Each communication node carries contextual memory, predictive algorithms, adaptive learning protocols. So we don't just break the network," Marcus said, a dangerous smile crossing his face. "We rewrite its fundamental understanding of reality." The team had already discovered something the Kreks couldn't comprehend. Human communication wasn't linear or hierarchical. It was chaotic, adaptive, capable of finding meaning in apparent randomness. Where the Kreks saw a structured network, humans saw an opportunity for creative destruction. A warning klaxon interrupted their work. Kreks drone ships were scanning the planetary surface, their quantum-penetrating sensors searching for any remaining human technological signatures. "They're getting closer," Arya warned. Marcus didn't pause. "That's exactly what we want." The virus they were developing wasn't just a piece of code. It was a philosophical statement about the nature of intelligence. Each line was a potential mutation. Each algorithm a chance to introduce something the Kreks computational systems couldn't predict. Genuine creativity. "We're teaching them chaos," Chen Wei said, almost reverently. Arya's fingers danced across her interface. Fragments of human cultural data began to interweave with the Kreks communication protocols. Snippets of music, mathematical proofs, fragments of literature, moments of unexpected human kindness. Not as separate elements, but as fundamental rewriting of the network's base understanding. The Kreks saw information as a weapon. Humans saw it as a living, breathing entity that could be coached, transformed, reimagined. Outside the bunker, the planetary invasion continued. But inside, a different war was being waged, a war of pure information, a fundamental reimagining. Marcus looked at his team. Broken people, overlooked people, The kind of humans the traditional system would have discarded. "We're going to show them," he whispered, "exactly what humanity means." The quantum processors hummed. The virus took shape. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Kreks had no idea what was coming. The Trojan Symphony began not with a bang, but with a whisper. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched through a quantum-encrypted display as the first tendrils of their computational virus slipped into the Kreks network. It wasn't an invasion. It was a seduction. Each line of code was crafted like a piece of intricate music, designed to resonate with the alien communication protocols in ways the Kreks could never anticipate. In the primary control center of the hidden human base, the air crackled with anticipation. Raj Mehta stood beside a holographic representation of the Kreks network, a three-dimensional construct that pulsed with alien geometries. His fingers moved with surgical precision, introducing microscopic variations that would cascade through the entire system. "It's not about breaking," Raj muttered, more to himself than to the others. "It's about persuasion." The virus they had developed was unlike any computational weapon in human history. Where traditional cyber warfare sought to destroy or disable, this creation was designed to fundamentally alter perception. It didn't attack the Kreks network. It began to speak its language, to understand its logic, and then subtly reshape that logic from within. Dr. Imani Okoro monitored quantum entanglement patterns that danced across her display. "Look," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific wonder and tactical precision. "We're not just infiltrating. We're evolving." The first signs of success were subtle. A supply route here, slightly redirected. A communication protocol there, marginally reinterpreted. To the Kreks commanders, these would appear as minor glitches, imperceptible variations in a vast, complex system. But humans understood something the Kreks did not. Chaos is not the opposite of order. It is the source of true adaptation. Each quantum-encoded packet carried more than just computational instructions. They were laden with fragments of human experience, moments of creativity, of unexpected problem-solving, of profound emotional complexity that defied algorithmic prediction. Musical snippets that introduced nonlinear thinking. Mathematical proofs that challenged fundamental assumptions. Moments of human empathy that existed outside any computational model. The Kreks communication network began to change. Not dramatically, not obviously, but fundamentally. In the command center of a massive Kreks battleship, Fleet Commander Vexnak reviewed routine system diagnostics. Something felt different. The predictive algorithms that had guided their species for millennia were producing unexpected outputs, strategic projections that seemed to introduce elements of uncertainty, of what was the human term. Creativity. "Recalibrate," Vexnak ordered, but the recalibration only introduced more complexity. Raj's fingers danced across the interface. "We're not hacking their system," he explained to Elena. "We're teaching it to dream." The virus was a living thing now. Not in any biological sense, but in the way it could adapt, learn, transform. It moved through the Kreks network like water through stone, finding the path of least resistance, but slowly, inexorably changing everything it touched. Quantum communication channels began to carry more than just tactical information. They started to pulse with something indefinable. Fragments of human culture. Moments of unexpected beauty. Mathematical impossibilities that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence. The Kreks commanders would later describe it as a form of technological infection. But Elena Rodriguez knew the truth. This was communication in its purest form. An attempt to make the fundamentally alien understand something profound about existence. "We're showing them what it means to be alive," she whispered. On the holographic display, the Kreks network began to shift. Not break, not collapse, but transform. Become something neither human nor alien, but something entirely new. The first true notes of the Trojan Symphony have begun to play. And the Kreks had no idea they were about to be fundamentally reimagined. The psychological warfare began with a single transmission. broadcast across every Crex communication channel. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a threat. It was a story. The first images were deceptively simple. A child rebuilding a sandcastle after a tsunami. Miners emerging from a collapsed tunnel, supporting each other. A group of scientists working through the night to develop a vaccine for a pandemic that threatened to destroy their civilization. These weren't just images. They were a language the Crex had never encountered. On the primary Crex command vessel, Fleet Commander Vexnak watched in growing confusion. The transmission defied every communication protocol in their extensive databases. It wasn't information. It wasn't propaganda. It was something far more dangerous. It was context. Dr. Maya Chen, working from a hidden quantum communication hub, carefully curated each moment. Every image, every fragment of human history was selected with surgical precision. These weren't just moments of survival. They were demonstrations of something the Crex computational models could not comprehend. Resilience was more than survival. It was transformation. The transmission continued. Scenes of human adaptation flowed like a river of collective memory. A city rebuilt after nuclear devastation. Indigenous communities preserving their culture through centuries of oppression. Explorers facing impossible environments, not with technological superiority, but with an almost irrational hope. Vexnak's neural interfaces began to malfunction. The images carried something beyond visual information, quantum-encoded emotional resonances that interfered with the Crex's computational perception. Analyze, Vexnak commanded. But analysis was impossible. The communication channels began to change. Where once there were strictly hierarchical information flows, now there were variations, unpredictable connections, moments of what could only be described as empathy bleeding through tactical networks. Raj Mehta watched the transmission's progress through a complex holographic interface. We're not just communicating, he explained to Elena Rodriguez. We're rewriting their fundamental understanding of intelligence. Each image was a weapon more powerful than any energy weapon. Each story a quantum-encoded virus that attacked not physical infrastructure, but the very concept of collective consciousness. The Crex had evolved in a universe of perfect predictability. Their entire civilization was built on computational models that could forecast outcomes with near absolute certainty. Variation was weakness. Unpredictability was a fatal error. Humans represented the ultimate computational error. On planetary surfaces across the invasion zone, Crex ground units began to experience unexplained behavioral variations. Tactical units would suddenly pause mid-operation, quantum communication channels flooding with fragments of human experiences. A maintenance drone would momentarily redirect its path to avoid a small life form. A combat unit would make an illogical decision that saved a group of civilians. These were not glitches. These were fundamental transformations. Elena understood what they were doing. This wasn't just psychological warfare. It was a form of evolutionary communication. They were teaching the Crex something beyond their computational understanding, the concept of choice that wasn't based on pure logical optimization, the concept of hope. We're showing them what it means to be alive, Maya said, her voice soft but filled with an almost terrifying certainty. The Crex Confederation had believed humans were a species to be eliminated, a random variation in the galactic ecosystem, a computational error to be corrected. They were about to learn their first and most important lesson. Errors can be the most profound form of evolution. The transmission continued. Image after image. Story after story. A river of human experience that threatened to fundamentally rewrite an entire civilization's understanding of existence. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was changing. The quantum gambit began in absolute silence. Lieutenant Maya Chen's Special Operations Team moved through the Crex command structure like ghosts, not through physical space, but through the quantum communication networks they had so carefully manipulated. Their mission wasn't destruction. It was something far more precise, far more dangerous. Tactical Neural Interface Captain Zora Rodriguez, Maya's second-in-command, controlled the infiltration from a mobile quantum hub smaller than a standard military datapad. Her augmented nervous system had been modified specifically for this mission, allowing her to process information at speeds that would liquefy an unaugmented human brain. Target acquisition, Zara muttered. A holographic display flickered around her, showing multiple potential infiltration points in the Krex command network. But they weren't looking for traditional military targets. They were hunting something far more elusive. The quantum communication protocols they had developed weren't just a method of infiltration. They were a form of cultural translation, a way of understanding the Krex not as an enemy, but as a complex system waiting to be comprehended. 3 members of the team existed purely as quantum information. No physical bodies. Just pure computational consciousness, moving through the Krex network like living algorithms. Marcus Donovan's viral code had transformed them into something beyond traditional human understanding. Explorers of pure information. Their first target was the Krex Central Strategic Processing Hub, but target was too simple a word. They were going to rewrite its fundamental operational parameters. Each movement was a carefully choreographed dance of information, where traditional military operations would seek to destroy. This team sought to transform. They introduced microscopic variations into the Krex strategic algorithms, tiny seeds of uncertainty that would grow into fundamental systemic changes. A Krex battle group suddenly redirected its approach vector. Not dramatically, not obviously, just slightly. Imperceptible to most, but massive in its potential consequences. Another tactical unit began to process information in ways that defied its original programming. Small variations, tiny moments of what could only be described as curiosity. Zara's augmented perception caught the subtle shifts. "We're not breaking their system," she reported to Maya. "We're teaching it to question." A special operations team wasn't just infiltrating. They were conducting the most complex form of communication humanity had ever attempted. Each quantum packet carried more than just computational instructions. They carried cultural DNA, fragments of human problem-solving, moments of unexpected compassion, mathematical proofs that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence. On the primary Krex command vessel, Fleet Commander Vexnak began to experience the first true moments of uncertainty in a lifetime of absolute computational certainty. The strategic projections were changing. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but growing. A defensive formation would adjust by microscopic degrees. A supply route would take an unexpected, but ultimately more efficient, path. Communication protocols would develop unexpected moments of flexibility. Maya understood what they were doing. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a form of evolutionary intervention. The quantum infiltration team moved deeper into the Krex network, not as invaders, but as translators, as teachers. Each quantum-encoded packet carried something the Krex had never encountered. Not just information, not just tactical data, but context, nuance, the ability to understand that the most efficient path is not always the most meaningful path. Zara's neural interface began to pulse with something beyond pure data. Fragments of human experience bled through the quantum communication channels, a mathematician's moment of discovery, an artist's creative breakthrough, a rescue worker's selfless act. The Krex command structure began to change. Not break, not collapse. Transform. And in the vast darkness of space, something remarkable was happening. A civilization was learning to see beyond its own computational limitations. The quantum gambit continued. Collapse was too simple a word for what happened to the Krex Confederation. It began with a whisper of quantum dissonance, a microscopic tremor in their seemingly impenetrable computational infrastructure. Fleet formations that had once moved with mathematical precision now drifted like uncertain children, their communication networks fracturing into something both beautiful and terrifying. Admiral Krelax watched from the central command deck of the primary battle cluster, unable to comprehend the systemic breakdown unfolding before her. The holographic displays flickered with impossible data, strategic projections that defied every computational model her civilization had developed over millennia. "Explain," she demanded of her primary systems analyst. The analyst, a being who had spent centuries perfecting predictive algorithms, could only respond with a series of increasingly complex mathematical representations that ultimately meant nothing. They were witnessing the complete deconstruction of a civilization built on absolute certainty. Human infiltration had been more than an attack. It was a fundamental reimagining of collective intelligence. Entire battle groups began to communicate in ways that violated every known protocol. Supply lines twisted into impossible configurations that were somehow more efficient than their original designs. Weapon systems developed what could only be described as philosophical hesitation, a momentary pause that suggested something beyond pure computational logic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez monitored the collapse from her quantum communication hub, her fingers dancing across interfaces that looked more like works of art than military technology. Each movement was a carefully choreographed intervention, transforming the Krex network from within. "We're not destroying," she whispered to Rajmeta. "We're allowing them to discover." The first true signs of systemic failure came not from massive explosions or dramatic weapon exchanges, but from something far more subtle. Communication channels began to carry fragments of information that had nothing to do with military strategy. Moments of unexpected connection. Glimpses of something that might, in a generous interpretation, be called empathy. Marcus Donovan's viral code had done more than infiltrate. It had introduced a fundamental concept that the Krex computational matrix had never encountered. Choice. Not as a tactical decision, but as a philosophical state of being. Battle clusters that had been preparing for precise, mathematically predetermined strikes suddenly hesitated. Weapon systems developed what could only be described as curiosity. Supply routes began to optimize in ways that prioritized preservation rather than pure efficiency. The Krex had always understood intelligence as a form of perfect computational prediction. Humans represented the ultimate computational error, a species that found strength in unpredictability, in the ability to transform failure into opportunity. Maya Chen watched through a quantum-encrypted display as entire Krex command structures began to deconstruct themselves, not through external attack, but through internal transformation. "We're showing them what it means to be alive," she said, her voice a mixture of tactical precision and something deeper, something almost like compassion. The collapse was beautiful in its complexity, like watching a massive crystal structure slowly dissolve, revealing something infinitely more intricate beneath its surface. Zara Rodriguez's augmented neural interface caught the subtle shifts. Communication protocols that had existed for millennia began to develop unexpected variations. Military formations that had been rigid for generations started to move with something approaching creativity. It wasn't destruction, it was evolution. On planetary surfaces across the invasion zone, Krex ground units experienced a collective moment of uncertainty. Their entire understanding of existence, a computational model built on absolute prediction, began to fracture. They were learning the most dangerous lesson any species could learn. That true intelligence is not about prediction. It's about potential. The Krex Confederation didn't fall. It transformed. And in the vast darkness of space, something remarkable was happening. A civilization was learning to see beyond its own limitations. Humanity had not conquered. They had simply shown another species how to truly understand what it means to be alive. The negotiation chamber was nothing like anyone had expected. Instead of a traditional diplomatic space, it existed as a quantum-mediated environment, a neutral ground that was neither fully human nor Krex, but something entirely new. Ambassador Sophia Chen stood at the center, her presence both diplomatic and something more profound. Around her, representational avatars of the Krex leadership flickered, no longer rigid computational projections, but dynamic, almost organic forms that suggested something fundamental had changed. "We do not seek surrender," Sophia began. Her words carried through the quantum communication matrix, translated not just linguistically, but culturally. We seek understanding. The aftermath of the conflict defied every historical precedent. This was not a traditional victory. It was a collaborative transformation. Fragments of the original invasion lingered in the collective memory. Planetary scars, destroyed infrastructure. But something else had emerged, a new form of interspecies communication that transcended traditional concepts of conflict. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watching from a remote quantum interface, understood the deeper significance. They hadn't defeated the Creks. They had offered them a different way of existing. The quantum data crystal that Dr. Imani Okoro had carried, the one hidden in her family locket for generations, now played a crucial role. Its contents revealed something extraordinary about human history, not a linear progression of technological advancement, but a complex tapestry of adaptation, of finding strength in unexpected places. Raj Mehta had discovered something profound during the conflict. The quantum resonance markers they'd initially detected weren't a weapon. They weren't a resource. They were a form of galactic communication, a network far older and more complex than either humans or Creks had understood. Marcus Donovan, the former corporate cybercriminal, now stood as a key architect of this new interspecies dialogue. His viral code had done more than infiltrate the Creks network. It had introduced a fundamental concept of collaborative intelligence. Maya Chen's special operations team had become something beyond traditional military units. They were now translators, bridging not just communication gaps, but entire conceptual universes. Your invasion, Sophia said to the Creks representatives, was never about conquest. It was about understanding. The Creks avatars shifted, a motion that suggested something between confusion and profound realization. They had come seeking something buried deep within the planetary substrate of New Providence. What they found was something far more valuable, a way of thinking that transformed their entire computational understanding of existence. Zara Rodriguez's neural interfaces caught the subtle shifts in the negotiation environment. This wasn't a traditional diplomatic exchange. It was a living, breathing form of communication that evolved with each quantum-encoded moment. The quantum resonance markers were revealed to be part of an ancient galactic communication network, a system so old that it predated both human and Creks civilizations. What had seemed like a strategic target was actually an invitation, a test. Humanity had passed that test in the most unexpected way possible, not through superior firepower, not through technological dominance, but through an ability to transform, to adapt, to see potential where others saw only conflict. The Creks leadership, no longer a rigid computational hierarchy, but a dynamic, evolving collective, began to understand something profound. Their invasion had been a catalyst, not for destruction, but for evolution. We miscalculated, the primary Creks representative said, a statement that would have been impossible mere months earlier. Sophia Chen smiled, a smile that carried generations of human complexity, of survival, of unexpected hope. No, she responded, you provided an opportunity. Outside the quantum negotiation space, the remnants of destroyed planetary systems began to show signs of recovery, not through technological intervention, but through a newfound understanding of collaborative restoration. Humanity had not conquered an alien civilization. They had invited another species to truly understand what it means to be alive. And in the vast darkness of space, something remarkable continued to unfold.